Hi there. This is Ed Kennedy, one of the co-founders here at Vibrant Money. I am joined today by my partner in shine. She's known as the Marie Kondo of money, Morgan Guerin, who's our money coach here. Hi.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for listening and tuning in.
So the reason we're having this conversation and recording this video is because you recently published an article on our website called Codependency and Money, the
Yes.
good, the bad, the ugly. So you've been money coaching for many years and you've been working with money for even longer. I'm fairly new to that game, particularly working with some of your clients who a lot of them are women. And I didn't realize how much codependency and money often show up together and how much codependency in relationships can affect someone's finances. So I wanted to actually share that article and kind of get more background from you on what you're seeing with your clients and just with people in general.
Yeah. I mean, they go hand in hand, right? Just like in the picture there. It's something that can show up in so many places for so many people, myself included. I mean, that's what gave me the ability to write the basis of the article.
Mm.
It's not just folks that I work with. It's something that's been present in my own life in the past, and that can surface, if I'm not kind of vigilant to make sure that I'm keeping things in check for myself.
Yeah, well, let's dive into that. The article's up on our website, so you can read through it and gather more information from what Morgan has to say. But maybe you can just start by telling us what codependency is. It's thrown around a lot.
Yeah.
What is codependency?
Well, that's such a great question. And it just even in my own work and in kind of learning and discovering along the way, it can be a very abstract concept. It can be very difficult to define or identify. And I think it shows up in a lot of different ways for people. So what I'll kind of share is from my own viewpoint, and then what I do see with some clients, and just basically what I've learned at this point. That being said, I do think I still have quite a bit more to learn about it, quite frankly. So I mean, what I tend to find is that the codependent behavior or pattern when dealing with your money often shows up in the form of caretaking. And what I mean by that is really taking care of others and putting their needs before your own.
Mm.
I think it can branch out in lots of different ways, but that is one of the most common ones that I see. And it's been my own personal experience as well. And it comes from either two people becoming so heavily reliant on each other that they really kind of can't function independently.
Mm.
And it also comes from the desire to, kind of fix or help or save or rescue a situation, which I think as women, it's in our nature to want to provide care. We are caregivers by nature. And so I think it's something that can easily be blurred. And that's why I think it can be so abstract to define.
So it definitely shows up in outside of money, but when it comes to the aspect of what you would see in your money is that you're taking care of another, and that's not inherently a problem, but it's taking care of another or a loved one to your own detriment.
That's the thing. It really is when you kind of take a back seat, your needs, the things that you want, those things get put to the side or get put on the back burner because somebody else in your life, now this can be a partner, it can be a spouse, it can be a child, it can be a friend, a coworker. It is really very broad as to where these patterns can play out in your life. Most often I see it in a partnership or in a parent-child relationship. That I think is just the area that I work in most. So that's usually where I see the dynamics at play. And it's just in my own past. That's where it's shown up as well as in relationships.
And you're
Personal,
using very
romantic.
choice words around behaviors or patterns. Can you
Yeah.
say a little bit more about why you say codependent behavior and patterns instead of just labeling it you're codependent or
Yeah.
people are codependent or not?
I think that does get thrown around so loosely. And I think it's easy to say, oh, that's codependent, or, oh, she's codependent, he's codependent. And I kind of myself just, I grapple with where those lines are. And maybe that's because I am codependent. I've experienced codependent patterns myself. So maybe that's why those edges are blurry to me. But I think, helping out a friend, helping out your partner, going above and beyond for your child because they want something specific. In any one event, it's not a big deal. Even if you're kind of sacrificing something or compromising something for yourself, if it's, an occasional occurrence, it's not necessarily a big deal, but it's the repetitive pattern that really kind of indicates that something greater is at play. So that's why I kind of say the behavior, the patterns, the repetitiveness, I think that's where it's like, oh, okay, if you can kind of connect enough dots, that's where you can kind of see, the dynamic at play. If you have an isolated event, or it's a couple of events that have taken course over a few years, okay, so what? You are helping somebody out. But if you continually sacrifice your needs and put somebody else ahead of you, or their desires or their goals, ambitions, whatever that may be, and you're not taking care of yourself, that's where the damage can be done.
And what you're talking about just a moment ago, that an isolated incident where you help a loved one and maybe you do sacrifice something or give something up, or you put yourself potentially at a temporary disadvantage, that might be okay, because that's kind of the good of codependency. That can you say a little bit more about what's the good part of codependency, or what is it reflecting? If there's good, bad, and ugly, what's the good part of it?
Well, it usually comes from a place of genuine care and concern, and often from a place of great generosity. It is often identified by over contributing, and those roots of contribution start in a loving place. Usually, and that's why this dynamic can be hard to really put your finger on and nail down. It's kind of squishy, because usually it is inside the context of some sort of a loving relationship, or the desire to help or support. So it really is usually coming from a sincere place of wanting to make a difference. That can get a little bit mixed together, where it's like, okay, you might be seeking some benefit in whatever's going on yourself. You might be looking for the upside benefit of that as well. But usually you are wanting something better for someone else. So it's very giving in nature, but it's, again, when it backfires on you, when your needs are not met. In my own past, it was like I would over contribute in a relationship that I was in, because I wanted the best for him. And the background, the story. I was dealing with somebody who was struggling with addiction, and I wanted to help. I really believed in him, and I wanted the best for him. I wanted him to be healthy and well. And so I contributed, and it started out innocently enough, kind of, oh, okay, things are a little tough right now. I can help out with that. But then it snowballed, and it got away from me, and I didn't know better. I didn't know what I was dealing with. And it had gotten to the point where I was actually in trouble, financial trouble, because I had over contribute, and I had allowed things to happen under the context of, I'm trying to help because I cared. And so it can start from a very sincere place. But the trouble comes in when you continually sacrifice your own well-being, which was what happened to me.
And that leads into the second part, the bad of codependency, particularly the impact it has on finances. So you're saying you were in a relationship where it started out potentially small and innocent enough, I'm going to help, and then it snowballed.
Yeah.
What did that look like on the court, or what does that look like with your clients when the bad starts to show up in their money?
Yeah, well, I've seen it time and again, where it's a little bit here, it's a little bit there. It doesn't seem like that big of a deal. But then if you compound that over the course of weeks, months, years, what you start to realize is that there are real missed opportunities, and it's everything's always on a spectrum, right? Like the damage could be pretty minimal all the way up to very, very severe. On the minimal side, I would say it's just missed opportunity, like money that you're giving to someone else or problems that you're solving. That's often the case too. It's like you're taking on responsibilities that aren't yours. So you may not necessarily be shelling out cold hard cash, but you're taking on other people's responsibilities. And that could also be a use of your time and energy. And so it's depleting other resources, not just necessarily your finances, but those kind of go together usually. And so you may just have missed opportunity. You weren't able to save or invest or have the experiences or, make the purchases that you would have liked to have for yourself or that you needed for yourself. And that's kind of one end of the spectrum, all the way up to, unfortunately, financial ruin, where we're talking foreclosures on homes. We're talking mass amounts of debt. We're talking drained retirement accounts, repossessions on vehicles, like the extreme end of it, right? And so things can take place all across that spectrum. But at the end of the day, it's what have you missed out on at the cost of somebody else? And it's tough when you are in these situations, if it's a loved one and you do want to help and you kind of say, well, it's worth the cost. Unfortunately, you don't usually understand the true cost of it until much further down the line. In my own experience, I wound up with credit card debt. It got pretty crazy. There were checks that were stolen from me and written fraudulently. There were things that had to be sold off at the end of the relationship. So it was quite dramatic and quite traumatic. And so I was probably still somewhere in the middle, though, because it could have gotten much worse. And I think there were just lots of missed opportunities along the way for me as well.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting to think about, that, when it's happening, you kind of don't feel the full cost of it and it shows up later. Another thing that I've noticed in the bad part of it, the financial impact, is that it kind of looks like a shell game. Like you help someone in your life, a loved one, a friend, a son or daughter, or even a parent, and you cover their cell phone bill. You cover their you help them go back to school and you pay for their education. You're trying to help them. You're wiping out maybe their debt. There's lots of different ways it shows up, but it's funny how the financial resources you have go to that, but then you kind of lose connection to how that affects your finances, because what you end up putting on your own credit card are groceries,
right,
or the vacation that you can't afford with your own money. So you end up financing other aspects of your life and going into debt or borrowing, not directly to help the loved one, but it's the shell game of the money moving from, okay, it was spent over here and now it's not available for what you truly need or want. And those things get put on credit cards or missed out on. And that's something I didn't realize until working more in this area with some of your clients, that it's kind of a shell game. It's not really obvious that there's a direct line to,
that's right,
I spent money and it's affecting me. It's kind of like later on you realize, oh, that I can't afford the things I need and want because I've already committed or spent these resources.
Yeah. That's why I say it's squishy. It's like you try to pin it down, it kind of squishes into another area, or it's slippery, right? It's like you're exactly right. It may not be a direct correlation. And so that's how sometimes you don't notice it. You don't notice that it's happening. And it's when your resources are depleted to where then you're having to make up for it in other ways, or you're having to go without. And that's where, a lot of times the dynamic can go on for so long that it can just become normal, where it gets normalized, where you pay for this, you pay for that, you bail them out, you help with this, you buy some extra school books, or, pay off a little bit of this for them. And it, bite by bite, it might not feel like a big deal, but it's then what is not available to you. And that could be, like you said, something as far as just a vacation or something short term. But I also see it in the long term, where people are then not able to invest efficiently in their retirement.
Yeah, they can't save because the
Yeah.
resources aren't there to actually put money aside or invest.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about the ugly side of this? So if the good is you care, and the bad is that it affects your finances and your own financial stability, what's the ugly side of this? What's the thing that really is the root cause of your own codependent behavior if you're exhibiting it?
Yeah, well, I mean, it often comes from the past. These codependent patterns are often developed very early on. And it can be, from something where you were in a situation, you were in a dynamic, you were in a relationship, something was going on that you wanted to change or fix, is where I find that this often comes from. So you kind of take on this fixer mentality. And that's what happens a lot of times is, as a recovering codependent in the past, I would find partners who really kind of weren't capable of doing everything they needed to be doing on their own, because there was some satisfaction in me feeling needed. The need to be needed was quite great. So that's where I would take on responsibilities, take on other people's problems, try to fix and solve and save. And I thought I was helping. I thought I was being useful. I was in this partnership. I loved this person, these people. And I thought it's what you did for your loved ones. That came from the desire to fix a lot of things. And I see that oftentimes that's where it comes from. People there was something in their past, whatever that may have been, that they didn't have control over. And so as they've grown and evolved, they've taken on the desire to kind of control. I think control can be a harsh word, or it brings up negative connotation, but really to control their environment and just try to have things be a certain way for them that works for them. And so they try to move the pieces around and really put everything into place and have it work just the way that they would love it to work. So the ugly side of it is that this can be a vicious cycle. It can play out over and over and over again until you get connected to what's happening. Those roots often run deep, and it can be something, something surface level traumatic to very, very deep rooted past traumas, or stress in your environment that you didn't have control over, things like that. So those roots can be tied to things that are very heavy. And so the pattern that persists can drive up resentment. I know in my past, it was like, are you friggin' kidding me? How is this happening again? Why am I here? And I would get bitter. I would get resentful because the help that I was offering and providing wasn't necessarily appreciated. And quite frankly, those people didn't want to be fixed. That was my problem. I brought that to the dance. And so the pattern kind of wore me down over time until I was able to identify what I was doing, and get some help and do some work and, be able to kind of clear some of that old behavior, quite frankly. So
it's so powerful that you can speak from experience, and I appreciate that you're willing to talk about it. And I know that someone watching also appreciates that you're willing to talk about it. Thank you.
Yes.
Because there's what's above the surface, the behavior and pattern, the observation of, okay, I'm giving financial resources to this person and it's affecting me. People might be aware of that, but what's under the water, that is really the root cause, or where you really have to go do the work to undo the pattern, can be upsetting and can be difficult.
Yeah.
So you've listed out a couple of different telltale signs of codependency. So I'm just going to read them, and you kind
Mhm.
of say, if 2 or 3 or 4 of these stand out, you might be exhibiting codependent behavior. So like you say, it is kind of squishy, and you have to
Mhm.
really just start to look at it yourself. So you say examples like, do you shield your loved one from the consequences of their financial choices and actions? Do you shield your loved one? Do you take a back seat in decision making to allow another person to feel a sense of control over a situation? Do you derive part of your identity or satisfaction from people needing you? Do you repeatedly lend or give money to your boyfriend, girlfriend, partner? Do you use your credit card to cover a loved one's unexpected emergency expense? Do you end up paying for a friend's portion of the bill? Again, when you go out to eat because they can't afford it, do you pay your partner's half of the rent or utilities? Do you rack up debt for vacations or shopping because they promise to pay you back, but they don't actually put the effort into doing so? Those are just a list of different examples that,
Yeah.
you probably have direct experience of, either you or your clients. So you're
Yeah.
saying that basically those, if a lot of those start to resonate, then, the signal might be there's something to look at here.
There's something to look at, right? And that's where, I'm I always feel like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth on some of this stuff, because there is a spectrum to everything. And it's like I think if you were to take any one of those, big deal, right? You pick up dinner for your friend. Okay, they're a little short on cash, or your kid needs help covering a few things while they're away at college or university, and any one of these things on their own is honestly no big deal. But it's, again, how many dots can you connect?
Mm.
And if you can start to say, oh, I'm seeing this over here, I'm seeing it with this person, I'm seeing it with that person, I'm noticing at work I don't have strong boundaries. It's always those patterns that we're looking for. And if anything, it's just, if it resonates with you, it's something to look at, because you might just be able to make a small shift. Now, if you're codependent and that you have these patterns in your past, then looking at the financial dynamic of codependency is critical. You have to look at that, because money touches everything in our lives, and it's highly unlikely that if you have codependent behaviors elsewhere in your life, that they're not showing up in your finances.
Mm.
So if anything, it's just a way to kind of get the wheels turning and kind of explore what might be going on for you.
Mm. Yeah,
I know when
that's
I read Codependent No More, a friend of mine sent me it. She said, okay, enough's enough. You need to read this book. She had recommended it a few times and finally popped it in the mail to me. And there's kind of this checklist in the front. And it's like, I can't remember, but it's like 4 or 5 pages long. And I was reading it and I was like, check, 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 check. And then I felt defeated. I was like, oh my God, what is this? What? But the good news was that it was, oh, okay, hey, look, if it's this much of a definable behavior, that means that there's also a definable solution. So, it was just kind of the moment where I was like, oh, yeah, I really need to look at this.
I think that's powerful. So you recommend Codependent No More to your own clients or
Yeah.
people in these
Yeah.
situations. Are there other resources that you recommend to people, in addition to just casually reading your article? Are there
Yeah.
other places they can go, or resources?
Codependent No More has been around forever. It's kind of like the place to start. And it comes with a workbook, so you can kind of do some exercises and
Mm.
work your way through some of it. There's also Codependents Anonymous, which is a 12-step program. They do online meetings, especially now with COVID and everything. So you can go to coda.org to look into that and kind of just learn and educate yourself. They have lots of free materials. And they are a really wonderful group. It's a smaller group in the 12-step community. They don't often have as many meetings as some of the other chapters or organizations. I don't know what you call it, other branches of 12 step. But it's something worth looking into. And then really just a lot of stuff around learning how to set boundaries, which was, one of my recommendations.
You mentioned that earlier.
Yeah.
I was going to suggest we close on that. That
Yeah.
seems to be the one that you come back to most often to talk about. Can you say a little bit more about, if you're noticing this behavior, what boundaries is a big topic?
Yeah.
It gets thrown around just like codependency.
Yeah.
What does that look like on the court with a loved one when you're saying set boundaries?
I laugh because I didn't even know what that meant. And my boundaries were just like, okay, I'm pissed. Stop doing what you're doing. And that was like, I was like, well, I've told you, how many times do I have to tell you I've set this boundary? And I just didn't really know what that meant. And I'm kind of laughing because I feel a little embarrassed, but I know that that's a common experience of just not really knowing what that even means or how to do it or what it looks like. But it kind of just comes down to, first of all, being able to identify your needs. And when you experience codependent behavior, it's often comes from a place of just not really knowing how to meet your needs for yourself. And I think there's a lot of things at play, and being a woman is part of that, where, if we are mothers or wives or even employees, we often feel like we have to give and caretake. And that is so it's squishy, it's slippery, right? Because there are healthy things that you do to help care for people. But when your own needs are not being met and are repeatedly not being met, that's where the red flag is. And so as you begin to identify what you need, and even what you want too, you're allowed to want what you want. But once you start to identify those things, then really kind of setting some lines. Boundaries are kind of a line of, here's what I'm willing to accept. Here's what I'm not willing to accept. Here's what I need to do for myself if those needs don't get met. And this can show up in all sorts of different ways, as far as, with money we're talking about, but, I'm not willing to pay for that anymore. I will cover this phone bill for you. This is the last time I'm going to cover it. And then you need to start taking your own responsibilities. Or, no, I'm not going to put that on my credit card because that's not in my best interest. Or, no, I'm not willing to pull money from my savings to, pay for odds and ends or wants and desires of other people. And it's kind of saying, no, I'm not willing to bail this situation out any longer. And the hard part is then letting the impact of that play out. Because again, the desire to help can be so strong that it can be hard to say, no, I'm not going to do this. And then you see that things don't go well because of that. And you then have to find your own strength to stand in the ability to say, okay, well, that didn't go well, but it's not my fault.
Yeah. And not take it personally that either how that person behaves towards you because you're changing your behavior, you're setting a boundary, and people don't like often these changes in these situations and dynamics. So you may feel the heat coming from that other person, and then also seeing the negative consequence of their decisions. And it can be very hard to separate yourself, is what I've learned from what you've shared. Is it's hard to maybe separate yourself from that behavior or that consequence being felt. And that kind of can draw you back in. So I think in summary, what I'm hearing is that it all starts with your own needs and wants and understanding those, because if you don't know what you need or want, it's hard to set a boundary to make sure that you get it and then take care of other people when those needs and wants are met.
Yeah. Well, if your needs are not clearly defined, you just begin to come from a place of reaction. It's like whatever is most urgent that pops up in front of your face is what you're going to take care of. That's what you'll focus on. That's what you'll put your resources to. And it feels like, oh, well, this is what I have to do. And so if you don't have those needs clearly defined for yourself of what's important. And that could be anything from, your emotional needs, your physical needs, your financial needs, even just how you like to spend your free time or your home environment. These needs can be very minor surface level, or they can be very deep. And if those aren't defined, you'll just end up kind of dealing with whatever pops up in front of you. And so that's where a lot of the real work starts to take place, is truly getting to know yourself. And I had somebody tell me, oh, don't worry. Recovering from codependency is fun because you get to learn how to take care of your needs. And that did not seem like good news to me at the time. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. But it really has been an interesting journey because I've gotten to know myself so much better. And I really do have fulfillment on a level that I wouldn't have been able to find previously, because I didn't even really know what I needed. And that can sound sometimes abstract, but that's why it's a journey. And that's why it's like, okay, if any of this is kind of, piquing your interest, then that's probably just a place to kind of start to dig in.
And you've done a great job. Thank you so much for writing the article. Thank you for elaborating with such detail and vulnerability now. You can always, for those of you watching, check out our website for more blog posts and articles like this. Just go to myvibrantmoney.com/blog, and you can see our latest articles, subscribe to our newsletter that we send out periodically. And these are the types of money conversations we want to bring out to the world. Thank you so much, Morgan.
Of course. My pleasure. I hope it helps somebody out there listening.
Bye.
Bye, guys. Mwah.